So, you know, California grows more than 400 crops. It includes 46% of America's fruits and nuts, 51% of America's citrus, 85% of America's grapes, 99% of America's almonds, artichokes, garlic, walnuts. California loses about 50,000 acres of farm and ranch land every year. And they say, you know, almonds. Okay, you call them almonds here. That's because you knocked the L out of them. So that first harvest, I think there were 950 some odd trees in the one orchard, and I ended up doing every one of those, and I knocked the trees. So you hit the bottom there if they're small trees, or if they're bigger ones, you take one of the bigger branches, and you take this mallet and you hit it real hard, and it knocks the almonds on the ground. It was a dirty job, but it had to be done, right? I like strong coffee, and I used to eat a real big breakfast early in the morning. Now I don't eat as much early in the morning. Then I often have meetings. I work on the volunteer stuff. This morning I was on a conference call at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock about Carbon Cycle Institute and the California Resource Conservation District. They want to do regional planning for carbon sequestering, and this is something that's very big right now. So we're trying to get a district representative for over several of the resource conservation districts, which I'm president of in East Merced here. So we have about 100 RCDs, resource conservation districts in California. So that's one of the things I do with the conservation district. It all ties in together. It's all for saving farmland and taking care of our earth. I really feel that the family is important. We got married in '65, and that was our wedding in the local church here. And I'm glad that I'm 350 yards away from the big house where my 3 grandchildren live. It's far enough away, but it's close enough that we can still work together. They can make a little money. They work on the ranch. They've learned the work ethic, which is extremely important. I feel this is one of the best opportunities if you live in the country on a small farm. The 2 of us, we're drying persimmons. We used to drive about 300 persimmons every year. My husband said this will be the last place I'll ever live, and this is where he ended up living. And we ended up farming for several years before he passed away. But he had worked really hard. He was born and raised here, and Okuyes were very well respected. Started with Seinosuke Okuye. He was 53 and he brought his family over. And he'd become a Christian in Japan. He was an engineer. He had more money than a lot of people, so he started with about 200 acres, I think.
He purchased enough land where he could build 13 houses. And when people came from Japan, they didn't have enough money to buy their own places yet. They worked on our farm and lived here, and they saved enough so that they could buy their own place. So we had a little community here.
I'm just very grateful for everything that I have. Then there's Tom Nakashima. He's a neighbor of mine, and he's here, and a very, very close friend. And his wife was a music major, as I was in college, and so they took us under their wings when we came here.
1980, they came back, and it was tough, but they survived. And Jeannie is a survivor.
We got involved with the church, and Tom made sure that we had all the help we could get. He had a mechanic. He had 3 employees. We didn't have anybody.
I helped him a little bit, irrigate and get things going.
And Tom was just side by side. Every day he was over here. Okay, now what do you need? What do you need?
She claims I helped her a lot, but I really didn't help her that much.
Yeah, I went over to his house and said, hey, I think I've blown up the motor in the sweeper. And they were going to pick up in a day or two. And so he got his, as I recall, he got his forklift out. So in the middle of the night, we're pulling the sweeper out over to his mechanic shop. And I borrowed his sweeper, and it's really nice to have that.
I was born about 2 miles from here in a little town near Cressy. I was born in 1927, February 6th.
I went out to play tennis with my friends, with my Japanese friends, because we were on the tennis team together. And as we were playing tennis there, a car stopped by the side of the Livingston tennis court. And there were about 2 or 3 men in the car. And they started to curse at us and call us all kinds of names and really made us feel bad. And so we left right away, went home, and listened to the radio, and that's where we found out that Pearl Harbor had happened. That's how we were initiated with what happened in Pearl Harbor.
I was a sophomore in high school when the evacuation orders came, and of course I was just 15 years old, so this thing called evacuation came along because of the war with Japan. And the only reason we were rounded up was because we had the same face as the enemy.
Actually, I was born right here in Livingston, lived my whole life here. So we know that after that, of course, all the issues that went on, there was a tremendous amount of propaganda that went on. There was a lot of dislike of Japanese people.
Men, women, and children herded into one place, one room. And it wasn't a very good situation. Of course, the main reason we speak like this is because it should never happen again to anybody in this country, or any country for that goes.
The notice came saying that we had to go to an assembly center by the 13th of May of 1942.
Well, May 13th, 1942, we were herded into the Merced Fairgrounds, which they called an assembly center at the time. We were there for 4 months, and then we were shipped to Colorado in a train. The blinds turned down. They didn't want us to see out, or they didn't want the outside people to see us, I guess.
They put us all on trains. They were old trains, and they had the shades all pulled down.
But they still had guards with guns watching us, make sure that we didn't get away. Of course, there was no place to go. We were let us off in the desert to stretch our legs.
And all these, the assembly center as well as the relocation camps had barbed wire fences around it, guard towers on the corners, searchlights on top, with guards in it that had guns, and the guns were all pointed in and not out. So we know that we were prisoners in these concentration camps. They came about at the same time, seeking people who could go into the translation and interpreting for the Pacific War. And so I volunteered for that.
We thought we were known as the people with the money in the camp and the block because we had our ranches. We still had our ranches back here, and they were being taken care of. And occasionally, I think there was some money sent in from our ranches. It was January of 1945. They lifted the ban on the West Coast. They let the Japanese Americans come back to the West Coast. And so we were not welcome at all. The Chamber of Commerce of Merced County, Chamber of Commerce of the City of Livingston, the Chamber of Commerce of the City of Turlock, they all said they did not want us back.
While my brother and I were both in the service, we found out that our home, along with several others in the area, were shot by people on the road, just right on the road.
Sherman Kishi's home, with he and his brother in the service, serving the country, were shot at, and fortunately nobody got hurt at that time. And the sheriffs came out and looked at the wall and saw the holes in the wall, and they told us that, you know, you're not wanted here, so you have to expect this, which was a real shock, because here we thought this was home, and people were shooting at us.
I think we have 3 bullet holes still in the house where the people did this to us. The Livingston community had 2 cooperatives. The first one was started about 1915, so you know they were a long time existence. The second cooperative was started several years later, and we became part of the second cooperative.
People who took care of it, what they call the Momberg setup, paid the taxes, paid the mortgages, and so and they rented the land out to tenants. So we were one of the very fortunate ones that had something to come back to when they lifted the ban in 1945.
But the cooperatives got together before they were evacuated, before the evacuation began.
They all got together and decided they had to do something to preserve the land while we were gone.
They got some trustees to look over all the farmland.
They hired this man named Gus Momberg, who used to work for the Bank of America, and the Bank of America had lots of property prior to the war that they foreclosed on, so he was running the farms.
He became the manager and ran all the farms of the 3 cooperatives that were involved, and that's how all the taxes were paid, the bills were paid, whatever had to be done.
He ran the ranches. He rented most of them out to tenants, but he oversaw the whole thing. And he paid the taxes, the mortgages that were due, and so when we came back in 1945, the places were all here, and so we were one of the very, very fortunate groups that had it set up like this.
Almost all the people who were in the cooperatives in Cortez and Livingston were able to come back to their farms without losing it.
We feel very fortunate that this has happened, that we did get this set up to take care of the ranches. When I was about 5 or 6 years old, we moved over to the ranch. It was part of the Okuye ranch, and my dad bought a small 20 acres of that.
My great-grandfather came over in 1906 or 7, and brought actually his son also, so my grandfather and great-grandfather came over.
There's a picture of the house. The old house is called the Cuy Mansion. So at that time, it was one of the bigger houses around here. So we've wanted to keep it in the family.
It's just been in our family ever since then. It's my uncle, and then when my uncle passed away, then we inherited it.
So there's quite a few people, of course they're all passed away now, but came to Okuye to work, Okuye farm to work, and then they eventually settled here. Maybe half a dozen of them.
My husband's grandfather was like the priest or the minister, and they had some of the services here on the Okuye farm, and so it's very much connected with the spiritual life of the community.
We used to come and visit my uncle who lived here before us, and so we knew the place and the property, but it was different to live here and actually have to go out and work.
Then in the 1980s, farming was difficult. We didn't know which way the water flowed. We burned up 2 tractors. Neither one was our fault.
So it was not the most fun time.
Our daughter was about 14, I think, or 15, and home here alone. We were out of town, and all of a sudden the sirens come down, and she hears sirens, looks upstairs, she was taking a shower, looked down, and here there are police cars, fire trucks, and so she went downstairs, and here's a tractor that had started up on its own, rolled up on top of a disc and caught on fire. And it was right next to the busy road, Cresty Way, next to our farm. Somebody saw it going by. And then Mr. Sherman Kishi said, oh, I've had that happen to one of my tractors. You take it, you bypass the safety, and if you leave it in gear, you can start it in gear. You bypass the safety, and what happens, there's dirt in there, and if it gets wet, it'll start on its own, and that's what happened. So 2 tractors in the first 5 years we were here, I think. But we bought used tractors, and because we didn't have the money, and went on, so.
We didn't hire people, so there's 4 of us that went before school and went after school and until late at night.
It's good for children to know what work is, and I was raised in the country in Northern California, and I packed pears. Actually, I picked up prunes when I was 10, I think, and I packed pears when I was 14, and I wanted the children to have some way that they could learn good work ethic.
And it was really tough times, but it made us really tight as a family, really close as a family.
My husband had Parkinson's already for 3 or 4 years, and we had to change jobs. And this came about, and I thought, why not? I like the country. And he was born and raised here, and the community was very supportive.
It was a big change, but it was a good one, though.
I decided I wanted to have something where I didn't have air conditioning, which meant you had to have a high R rating and insulation. And I ended up doing a straw bale house, which I'm in right now. I built it about 12 years ago. It's been, in 12 years, it's been 83 degrees, only a few days total. And this summer, we've had temperature up to 104 degrees a few days, and it has not hit anything over 80. So, but I cool it down at night. I can bring that temperature down 15 degrees at night by putting on my whole house fan, and I love it. If you look back at Los Angeles in the 1960s, they were the largest ag-producing county in all of California. And you see the sprawl. It's not, you can't, distinguish one town or city from another city. It just goes on and on and on. The prices over on the coast were going up for housing, and people were encouraged to move over here. Investors wanted to move over here. They could buy land cheaply because a lot of the kids on the farms wanted to go to the city. It's been a real threat. So one of the biggest threats in our valley is to protect the land from being, covered over with cement or asphalt. So I was familiar a little bit about what easements were, and I thought this would be great for this land to be protected. And after all the Japanese Americans went through to save this land, and being taken off during World War II and all, we had a passion to save this as farmland and to not have it developed. So I applied, and I talked to my family a long time before I made this decision, and got information, shared it with my 2 children and their spouses, and they were all agreeable to it. There are a lot of benefits to putting an easement on your farm. Some people say, well, it'll tie it up and the value is less. And we've talked to people, and they realize that if we don't do something, this is one of the few ways that we can save land for perpetuity, in perpetuity. I have a team that volunteers with the Farmland Trust, and they come and they make sure that we don't put houses on it, that we haven't done anything to violate that. So that's important to monitor, and every year they come. So it's a very, very good program, and it's about the only thing we have out there, except trying to get policymakers that are educated enough to understand the importance of saving farmland.
So my son, who is now 11, but when he was about 2 years old, he's always he loved the farm and loved driving tractor and farming and everything. And so when he was about 2, and he was thinking, and he thought, Mom, when you die and the farm is mine, I'm gonna do this and this. And I just said, I don't have to die. You can have the farm. I don't have to die. You can have it. I'll give it to you.
I have real concern, the threat of our small farms disappearing. and families not having that opportunity. It's so hard for young children to have the opportunity to work. And if they live in a farm, there's always something for them to do. So I think family is so important. And I tell people, you know, and I do a lot of volunteer stuff, but I say, if you have family, that comes first.
And I think that he really feels his roots are here. And he says he always wants to live in the house. And he said, I can also stay here if I want to.
You know, you build ownership in it when you work really hard, and when you have community pulled together like that, it's what life is about, you know, taking care of family and friends. And with people working here, I mean, living here and working someplace else and in the cities, and it's just hard to have that community feeling. It's really, really important for the next generation to see that too. And we have several generations working together. You'll find often 3 generations on the same farm.
With the history of the Japanese Americans, they've worked so hard to keep their farms after being interned during the war. And they've really fought to keep their property and from not losing everything during difficult times.
And that's one of the blessings about having a small farm. You work together, and if you have small children, they grow up, they learn about life and death, they see, you know, they have animals, and they see the seasons, the harvesting, and how much work goes into producing a crop.
Because it's so easy for the city to take over us and pave the ground, and you know, without agriculture, we're really nothing around here.
Yeah, I think it's very important that farmland be saved, because, you know, cities keep growing out further and further out.
And there's a lot of traffic and buildings everywhere, and it's precious land. There's, you know, people think, you know, driving through, you think, oh, there's so much farmland and there's so many trees, but little by little, it's just getting all whittled away, and it's a real shame.
We tried to get our farmland in the valley somehow protected, that it should be a treasure. You know, we need to somehow preserve it.
And we have some of the best farmland you could purchase any place. We can grow almost any crop.
So I'm trying to get more people in my community to do more land trusts. And the larger area we have, the less apt it's going to be paved over.
We have parts of the land that I would like to see continue in farming as long as it's possible to do that.
There's only 3 places in the world where we have a climate like this.
Be advocate for saving the farmland.
But, she's a jewel, and she's a big asset to the community and to the country, because, you know, she looks out for everybody and anything that needs to be saved.
It's been a real trip, but a good one.
So I'm happy that she dedicated this land.
But living with nature, as close to nature as we can, and protecting our resources. We're going to grow, but once you put a house on the farmland, it's a one-time harvest.